and welcome to the Agile Speaker. In season 4, we're turning the spotlight onto the speaker. I want to capture stories, experiences, and helpful takeaways from clients I've worked with over the years, so you, our listeners, hear from the speakers themselves, as opposed to advice from me. They come from a range of different sector, different size of business, experience, and background. But what connects them all is they've all taken to the stage, presented to the boardroom, pitched to investors, or had to influence audiences in some other way. As you'll hear, I had such a great time catching up with all of them, and I hope you enjoy listening to our conversations and find their advice and top tips helpful. Today, I'm delighted to have Professor Caroline Barelle with me. Caroline is the CEO and founder of Elasmogen. Caroline, it's lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
I am very, very well. And thank you so much for the kind invitation. Lovely to see you too.
So we first met many years ago, 2015. Yikes. So yeah, that feels like quite a long time ago when you were doing the Royal Society of Edinburgh Enterprise Fellowship. And I remember very clearly working with you I think we were in a hotel in Dundee. I was working as an associate for the Entrepreneur Business School who delivered the overall business training of the fellowship program. And my role was to work with you and the other entrepreneurs on how to pitch and present when you were talking about the businesses that you were setting up. So I was wondering, could we start by you giving us a brief intro about what Elasmogen does?
Yes, of course. And goodness me, I can't believe it's that long. How wonderful. Time flies when you're enjoying yourself.
Exactly.
Elasmogen it's a biotech company. We're all about delivering new medicines to patients. And what we do is the very, very start of that whole journey. We're looking to design and develop new innovative drugs to help unmet medical need. Our focus is on autoimmune disease and also cancer. And we're using a technology that is similar to antibodies, but they're much, much smaller. We call them soloMERs. And we can click these soloMERs into lots of different constructs, lots of different designs to try and really tackle the most complex of diseases.
Is it a bit like Lego bricks to build up different designs of, different constructions of different? Is that the sort of?
I love that. You're so spot on. Yeah, I usually use stickle bricks, but that's because I'm of a certain age. Yes, and so you're exactly right. So they're little,
Okay.
They're little and they're simple, and we isolate them against different disease targets. But disease is complex. It's complicated. If it wasn't complicated, it wouldn't exist. We'd have nailed it as scientists by now. Yeah. And the complexity is not just in the biology, it's in the individuality of us. Yeah. We're all very different, and thank goodness we are. And so what you need to do is you need to think much more broadly about how you develop new drugs. You need to understand in depth the kind of basic biology. You need to understand what the targets and how they interact. You need to understand the genetics of the patient. There is a lot of different stages there. And please know that it takes a village of fantastic scientists and also a larger group of individuals, a lot of knowledge that's been understood or developed for a long, long time in the academic world, for example, to enable us to really try and get a grasp on what these drug designs should look like.
Amazing. So if we go back, so 2015, you'd already raised money, I think, at that point when we'd met. And so can you give us a thumbnail sketch of what's happened since those early stages of the company?
Yes, certainly. So biotech is a funny old world. We make nothing and we sell nothing, but we need a lot of money. And the way that it works is we look for investment. So investors come in, they put money into the company. We develop value in the company by developing these new drugs. It's essentially a bio business. And so what we're looking to do is to get investment to develop these new drugs. and then hopefully to license these drugs to bigger pharma companies who will then take them through to late stage clinical trials and then through to approval. And by doing that, we will gain some revenue. So that's kind of broadly how the business works. And so we are dependent on investment. There's no question about that. And when I first met you, which was wonderful in 2015, that was the year before we spun the company out. So we were just on the cusp of getting that initial investment in order for us to create Elasmogen, which was incredibly exciting. I mean, for me as an individual, and I have to say, the Royal Society Enterprise Fellowship, your guidance, all the other guidance helped me at the most critical time when I was just about to set out on this new venture. I'd never done business before. I had never set a company up before. So the timing was just beautiful. And so at that point, we spun the company out. And then, of course, what you're looking for then is to define the business model, to define which drugs you're going to go after. You need a good scientific team. That is the foundation of any biotech company. And I was very fortunate because I managed to bring together a wonderful team, many of whom are still with me today. I love them dearly, and they've supported me and they've supported the company on this journey. But since then, we've gone from strength to strength. We have secured collaborations, so across different sectors, so working with academics, for example, working with other biotech companies, bringing together our technology with other technologies to create new types of drugs, which is really important. You can't work in a silo. You've got to go broad. And then the other aspect is, of course, that we've managed, because we've had these successes, we've managed to get more investment as we've gone down this path. Our last investment came in April last year, which was fantastic. So it brings in new investors around the table. Those new investors, as you mentioned, the boardroom, they bring strength around the boardroom. We have a new chair, our chair, Jane Dancer, who started last year. We've got new non-execs who are expert in the biotech world. All of this support system has been strengthened, which helps me as the CEO, and I guess the person who needs to define the strategy of the company, do my best to take the company in the right direction.
Awesome. So you're based in Aberdeen now. You've always been based in Aberdeen, haven't you?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
And how big is the team based there?
So the team base is the research base, if you like. So there is 11 of us here in Aberdeen, and that's very much, the majority are actually at the bench. I am a liability in the lab. They wouldn't let me near the bench. So I guess I'm one, including our VP of R&D, are kind of the conductors of the science, if you like. We do all the other stuff in the company.
Awesome. Okay, brilliant. So over your experience, well, over your whole career, not only in your time with Elasmogen, thinking about the communications that you're involved in. So I believe, as you know, in the need to be agile across all of the different situations and environments that we're communicating in. So being able to move from one to the next and be able to deliver your message and get your personality across consistently, whether that environment is, a one-to-one or one-to-many. So it could be less formal with your team, for example, or it might be around the board table with those investors. And as you've just pointed out, that boardroom, as it grows, investors that you've had a relationship with for many years, to then bringing in new investors and expanding that out, who you're building that relationship with. So that's quite an interesting angle on it as well, but also to speaking on stage at events. So through to those more formal environments, I believe that every single one of these might present an opportunity to you and to your business. So with that in mind, can you just talk us through some of, I'm sure you're probably, everything I've just mentioned, be like, yep, I do it all. But, what are the things that stand out to you that you're doing day to day where you've got to really think on your feet and be agile as you're going along?
That's I think you just summarized my life there, Marianne. Yeah, it's agility. It's such a great word, actually, and I love the fact that you use it because it's critical. It's integral to my life every single day, because things change. In the world of science, you have internally a lot of change. So you can design the best experiments, the best studies, you can put forward a hypothesis, and things don't always turn out the way you want them to turn out. You get data, and that data is solid because you've controlled for that experiment. But then you've got to think on your feet and try and analyze that and try and work out what's going on. So internally within a biotech company, there's a lot of change going on. Externally, the external environment also affects you, because there could be individuals, companies, big companies, who completely change their strategy and no longer are interested in certain areas or certain disease indications. There could be a clinical trial which didn't work out quite the way that they expected it to, and you could also be working in that area on that target and such like. So agility, flexibility, adapting to the change that goes on daily is absolutely critical. And of course, part of that, and a key part of that, is communication, is being able to absorb all of that and to be able to communicate, articulate any of these changes, any of these decisions, any of these adaptations that you've got to make to the company strategy. And as you quite rightly said, that happens at multiple levels. It happens on a daily basis. And I find myself, I love what I do because I love people, and inherently talking is one form of communication. And so I do that all the time with individuals. I guess my leadership style is to bring people along and ensure that people have the information that they need to be able to do the job that they need to do, but they know also what's happening on the whole level of the company as well. So I find myself interacting one-to-one with the team. I interact with different parts of the team over different areas that they're working on. I do these town hall meetings, which are purely strategy to bring the team with me so they understand what's happening at the board level, at the strategy level as well. We all kind of gather around, we have sandwiches, we have a fine piece, as I would call it, which is a cake and a coffee. And what's important is for me to be able to communicate in a way which is absolutely open and honest, but balanced. Because in a biotech company, you have a lifespan, right? And that lifespan is measured by the amount of money that you have left from the last investment. So it's a kind of strange company in that you know where your end point is. We have a date. We have what we call, I call it the death curve of cash. And we plot that cash. And so we know exactly when it runs out. Okay.
Right.
And the whole team knows that too. Now, that can be quite a frightening thing when you're employed by a company and you know when the kind of end point is of your employment, for putting it quite straight. But what the beauty of the biotech company is that we're all together. We've got a common goal. We're all working together towards, one, absolutely bringing new medicines into the clinic. I mean, we are all of the same mindset. We do this job because that's our main driver, our main passion, but also working together for the success of the company in order to achieve that. And so I've never felt frightened about sharing all of that information because it's critical, it's important, it's our team's livelihood as well as ours, right? And I put them first. So communication, being completely honest and open about that, is something that I do all the time. And then, as you said, obviously, you've then got the board, which is another level of communication. I'm very fortunate because I have a great relationship with the board, and I believe it's critically important to have a great relationship with the board. The board need to be informed in order to make these critical decisions. So you have to have open communication with the board. They have to understand what's going on. If that study didn't work out quite the way we wanted it to, and we're going to get a delay on a milestone, for example, obviously the board need to know that. So I have obviously formal board meetings, but in addition to that, I have one-to-one meetings with board members as well. I have very regular meetings with certain board members, particularly my chair and a non-exec director, for example, because they're integral into what's happening with the company. And I gain as much as they gain from these conversations, from these discussions. That's also the important part, is it's a two-way thing. Whenever you're doing any kind of verbal communication, it's a two-way thing.
And do you think, from that huge variety of different experiences that you have, so, it's the 1-to-1s, 1-to-5, 1-to-10, 1-to-hundreds, are there anywhere, you feel more at ease than others? Or, are you, because I've seen you stand on stage when you've been delivering a keynote at Converge, for example, and you look like just completely relaxed and enjoying the whole thing, and that you seem completely relaxed doing something like that, when often, as we know, a lot of people, I would say maybe, I don't know, 60% of my clients, that would put the fear of God into them doing something like that. But having said that, there is another 40% of my clients who would say, I'd much rather do that than be in a smaller team meeting, not necessarily team, but a group meeting with a smaller group where you can see the whites of their eyes. So it's really interesting, because I think a lot of people, we hear in the media, we read about how standing on stage is the thing that really terrifies people, but actually that's not always the case. So I was intrigued to hear from you. Maybe you're relaxed with all of it, but are there any situations where you say, I'm far more comfortable with that type of environment than another?
And no, it's a great question, and I've been round the block for quite a while when it comes to speaking and such like. And honestly, I have physiology the same as everybody else has physiology. So I may look calm, but I always get the same kind of feeling before you go up. So that has never changed. I still get the whole, my heartbeat goes a bit faster and I'm thinking, crikey, really still? I still get the whole, oh my gosh, I've got no saliva left in my mouth. How am I going to be able to speak? So that's physiology, and you've got to embrace physiology. So please know that that's normal. So I think that, coming back to your question, if there's any kind of situations that I enjoy more, I mean, the Converge was lovely. The Converge is lovely because you're in amongst friends.
Yeah.
It's a relaxed environment. It was a special evening. It was giving out awards for people who have done amazing things. Yeah. I adore that. And when I was asked to speak, I've done a couple of them now, actually, I think. And when I was asked to speak, I was really chuffed. I thought, good crikey, that's really nice of you. And that evening, I think I was sitting on the table with the First Minister at the time. And so and then I'm kind of thinking, crikey, I've got, not that anyone's any more special than anyone else, I can assure you. But I kind of, me, I just kind of go up, and I enjoyed it. And I think a big reason I enjoyed that one was because I was myself, which sounds ridiculous, but what I did was I made it more about myself, because I used Doric. Doric is my kind of dialect that we use in Aberdeen. And I thought, well, it's an after dinner speech. We're going to have a bit of fun. I'm going to throw some Doric in. And that just made it easier for me, because it was just me, basically, with the people that surround me every day. That's the way that they talk. And I just wanted to share that. So that was a lovely evening. I really, really enjoyed that. But yes, you're right. Going up on a stage, you're exposed. You're probably more exposed, because if the room's really big, the stage is really big, there's a big screen, there's lots of technical stuff, there's a clicker you need to use, and there's a pointer you need to use, and there's a podium and all the rest of it. You can find it can be quite overwhelming, and it can be frightening. It's frightening, right? But then, like you said, sometimes when you're in a room with many, many people, you don't really see them so much. You were spot on with the white of their eyes, because they just become an amalgam of hundreds and hundreds of bodies, right? So I'm kind of accustomed to doing all of the above. I would say that probably the more frightening ones, which are than I've done, were actually in front of an audience that we were we were trying to win a competition. I think it was at some point. It was I can't remember what it was actually. I think it was probably some company of the year. I don't know, BBSRC or something like that. I can't quite recall. And for some reason, I just felt, as soon as I walked in, I didn't feel so comfortable. And I think part of the reason I didn't feel so comfortable was that the slide deck that we had put together had been, I wasn't quite comfortable with what we were saying message wise.
Yeah.
It was a bit more corporate than it was personal. And I just felt it was a bit flat, and I'm not good with flat. And so you just felt like you're going through a process rather than being engaged in the process, So anything that's a bit kind of mechanical, anything that's a bit this you're kind of restricted in what you can say and what you can do and how you can do it. That's always, I find that just a little bit boring, if I'm a bit honest with you. And I struggle a bit with that because I can't be me as much as I want to be me.
Had somebody else put that together for you?
Yeah, it was very much it was a combined effort, but some of it was not me at all. And I just felt that, you know me, I like a little bit of fun, and I enjoy what I do, and I'm passionate about what I do. And so if it is just a kind of, click from slide to slide and convey a very kind of limited message about something, and it could have been the constraints, forgive me, because I can't quite recall what the whole gig was, but it could have been the constraints of what we were allowed to say anyway, and there was a format, and it was a restrictive format so that they could judge different companies the same way. Yeah. So it was probably the constraints of the whole thing. And I'm not one for constraints.
No, you're certainly not. But that's so interesting, Caroline, because that's just highlighted a couple of things that I think are really important to all of this, because from the one point of view, talking about you as the presenter, and I come across this a lot with companies where, for example, so this has happened quite recently, actually, one client of mine in London, they are really keen to get a lot of their sales team out speaking at more events. We want you to raise the profile of the business, go out and promote the company, speak on panel discussions, speak at conferences, go and take part in exhibitions and that sort of stuff. But what was happening, and this is a few years ago now, the marketing team was basically emailing the salesperson saying, here's a deck of slides, and you're going to present this in Glasgow, in a month's time. And the speaker receiving these slides going, what? Yeah. Like, I'm reading through this, and this is not me, and this is really awkward, and really, really difficult. And suddenly that pressure, the heart rate's going, whoa, right up through the roof. They start to lose sleep, start worrying about how on earth. So, and in that particular situation, I ended up, speaker who I knew had gone in touch and said, help me, I don't know what to do. And we ended up really deconstructing the deck, turning it into a narrative, then pulling back in the slides that were relevant so that he could then go and stand at this conference and deliver it being himself.
Right.
So it was this really, so there's one aspect there of having, and the frustrating thing, of course, is there that the marketing team spent a load of time, your team, all of you collaborating on the deck have spent all that time, but then for the person who's leading on it to not be able to deliver it the way they want to deliver it, there's just a whole lot of hurdles in there, aren't there?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's great. I mean, that's what you're very good at that. You're a wonderful, beautiful storyteller. And that's what you need. You need to have yourself. If you're presenting, it's you.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But I think the other side of that story you just shared, though, was also the constraints that perhaps the program you're applying to, who are setting the rules. And actually so my experience of that, I've only had a couple of experiences personally of doing that, but one was for a public sector contract. And I remember, going along and doing the pitch, and it was all really, it was that really awkward thing as well, where I knew the people on the other side of the table. I'd worked with them before, and you just get this panel of 3 people. So it's only 3 people, but they're literally straight-faced. And no smiling, no friendliness, no none of that rapport that you have had in the past.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's so
and it
true.
makes the whole thing feel incredibly awkward.
It's surreal. Yeah.
And if they've said this is what we want you to talk to us about, those constraints on what you're allowed to say constrain you, and then you think, well, hang on a minute, if this is about delivering something and a working relationship for the next few years, that has also put in, I mean, I understand why it's done, but it is setting out challenges for the individuals, isn't it?
Yeah. No, listen, I truly understand why it's done as well, because I mean, it's just the format that it had to be in for comparison. But I resonate with the whole people in the room and just sitting there with no expression and such, like that. You're right. So the whole thing, and I remember, sorry, I'll just throw this one in as well. I remember giving a pitch once, and it was, I mean, I've done many pitches, but this one was in a room that was full of people that I didn't know. There was no time for introductions, right? So you had a whole row of people down one side, and you had the investors at the back wall. And I don't know what they had done. I'm sure it wasn't deliberate, but the lighting was such that they were just shadowed out. It was the creepiest thing ever. So you were talking to people you couldn't even see. I mean, it was just so strange. And I thought, no, they didn't do that deliberately, did they? They're not making it, because sometimes they create these pitch environments. They want to make it, they've got a big clock on the wall and it's ticking down, and they make it this pressurized situation because it's all about it adds a little bit of drama as well. You're
the entertainment show.
And that was a bit strange as well, actually. And also, sorry, I'll say this as well. At that one, I was sitting down. You were just sitting in front of a laptop and the screen was behind you. So the setup was awkward in many different levels because I'm a mover. So if you're sat and you're even more constrained physically and you don't, the screen is behind you and you're operating the laptop yourself, that was strange. So
it's just fascinating, isn't it? There are so many things that can come into play that can be outside of our control that just get that pressure going, aren't there? Whether, as we've just said, the people that you're speaking to, the environment you're in, the setup, all these things. And so it's challenging to be agile. So it can be really challenging to be agile with all the different environments and audiences that you're speaking to, with all of these unpredictable situations that you can face. So having this skill of being a good communicator, what do you think it is that you're doing day to day that helps you to be agile? What do you do in terms of your preparation or delivery to help you on that journey?
Ooh, good question. Good question. I think coming back to just the nature of our world is that change is normal. And I think that it's just integrated into our daily lives that we have to expect almost the unexpected as much as we don't want the unexpected to happen. So it comes from experience, I think, is one thing, just in the kind of life sciences world that we're in, there's a lot going on at any one time. So you have to adapt, and you have to, the company needs to evolve to a certain degree as well. I won't use the word pivot. That's a bizarre one for me, but, it just needs to change and adapt accordingly. I think that I'm fortunate. In fact, I'm privileged. I consider myself very privileged that I work in a world where lots of things are going on at any one time. So we have the fundamental science in the lab. We've got what's happening outside the world in the external environment. I need to keep up with what investors are doing. I need to keep up with what big pharma companies are doing. I need to understand what's happening in the clinical trial world. I need to understand what's happening with the markets. Obviously, there's been a lot of disruption recently. And so my world naturally is lots of different things going on at any one time. And I think that that's just probably the way that my brain works. I consider myself a bit of a magpie. I jump from one shiny thing to the next, which isn't necessarily the best mentality to get big things done. I have to discipline myself sometimes and shut myself off and go away into a small dark room and do certain things. But I quite like that I've identified that with myself, is that when lots of things are thrown at me, I can take them, I can think quickly, and I can act quickly. And that just, I think, is the nature of the kind of work that I've done all the way through my career. And I think it's just me, actually.
Yeah.
But I would add that the absolute converse is true, actually, as well, which my husband will be testament to, is that when I switch off, I switch off. Because I have to, for my own health, my own mental health. Yeah. I need that complete opposite time, that I can try and not think about everything else that's going on, because it does take over your world and your mind. And so I do things like, I'll watch things on TV and he's like, Caroline, that's just like intellectually non-existent. And I'm like, yes, and that's why I'm watching it, you know?
It's
or
perfect.
I'll paint. I'll just put music on, I'll blast music on. We're very fortunate because we live in a house not very close to anybody else. We're not very sociable people. And so we'll just blast music out and I'll just paint, and things like that. And so I'll shut myself away from that. But then when I'm back in it, I'm click, 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 I'm back into it very quickly. So I think it's almost like subconscious training that my mind or my brain just enables itself to deal with lots of different things at any one time.
Okay. And would you say that do you prepare? Are you a planner? Do you set aside, you protect time within your diary to also set some time aside to think about what's coming up next?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting one. And I would say that yes and no is the answer to that. If I'm preparing to give, it depends what I'm preparing for, actually. So I am using the word preparing. So I do prepare. But if I'm giving like a scientific talk or standing up in front of a scientific audience, obviously I've got to prepare because I've got to pull the data together. We've got to pull the slides together. We've got to understand, the outcomes and the details of those studies and such like, because scientific talks are a very different beast, because you're dealing with an audience who are technically very, very savvy, and you'll get asked those kind of details and things. So I have to prepare for that. I have to know what dose, what affinity, all of these buzzwords that we use in our world. I need to understand all of that, and basically what the consequence and the conclusion is of all of that work. So that requires preparation, and that requires the scientists, the team, to help me with anything like that. And equally, if they're giving those talks, I'll help them prepare for that. In other circumstances, so for example, for that Converge talk, for example, as soon as I'm invited to do something, what I will do is I'll find out, or I'll get an idea of who the audience is, and I'll start mentally storyboarding. So I'll think of a theme. So that's where I always start off, is I think of a theme. I never write anything down, right? And I think it's just because my handwriting is appalling. I can't be bothered typing stuff. I just do it mentally. Yeah. But I find myself driving in the morning, for example, and my mind's going, well, yeah, okay, I could maybe pull that in, or that would be okay, that would be interesting. And then I shut it away and I get on with my day's work or whatever. But then again, if I've got a quiet time, I'll be honest, I'll not look at the screen. I'll make myself a cup of coffee. I'll turn my chair around in my office and I'll look out randomly at the car park.
Yeah.
And then I'll sit and have my coffee for 10 minutes, and my brain will re-engage with that theme again. That's that mental storyboarding. And I'll go through that again. And I think that's the way that I do it, is I don't tend to memorize. If I've got a slide deck, the slide deck tells me where I'm going. And that's a great aid memoir and particularly for scientific talks. You have to have that. It's hardcore data, graphs, numbers, all of these beautiful things that we get excited about, and obviously why it's important. If I'm standing up with nothing, then it's that, I'll have key things in my head that I think, oh, that's a good story. I'll touch on that. But there is a lot of free flow between that. And I have to be like that, because one, that's the way I am. And two, if somebody stands up and gives a talk beforehand and they say something funny or interesting, I like to pull that in if I can. And if I'm too constrained or too prescriptive about what I've decided what to say, then I lose the ability to pull that in and make it a bit more, continual, have that kind of connectivity with the previous speakers and stuff. So that's kind of, there is no formula.
Yeah, but
There
that's a
is
great
no,
formula.
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
great formula. And if it's the formula that works for you, then that's brilliant. Have you ever had a moment with that kind of formula? I mean, I was just thinking, if you're preparing for a big event, you're going on stage, you're meeting loads of people beforehand. Have you ever had a situation where something's gone, something unexpected has happened before something like that, where you haven't had a slide deck as an aid memoir, where you are relying on your brain? And do you have a tactic, for dealing with that kind of situation? What's your thinking about that?
Yeah. Oh, listen, if there's any technology associated with anything, like this morning, my Zoom wasn't working to have this conversation. This is just classic. So if you've got to kind of you've got to be able to deal with situations which aren't going to pan out the way that you want them to. I think that's true in any aspect of life, to be perfectly honest with you. And giving presentations is one of them. So yeah, I mean, I can throw in an example. There's been, as I said, I've done many talks, so lots of different things have happened. Right back to the old day when we had diazo slides, the old, in the slots in the slot machine, and they went, they all started flipping out. And anyway, but I won't go back that far because most of your listeners wouldn't have a clue what I was talking about.
Projector slides.
Projector slides.
Yeah.
Time
Gosh.
to make one.
Yeah,
Oh,
a clicker, a little circular clicking thing going around.
They started throwing the slides out.
Yeah.
This big conference, and I thought, oh well, there we go.
I'm
No solving that one.
I'm going to put a link in the show notes for one of those so that anyone who's not sure what we're talking about could
what
have
I'm
a look
talking about
and see just how far things have come.
Yes, you see how fortunate you are now these days. So anyway, so there was one talk I was giving, and again, I'm so lucky. I get invited to give talks, and it's precious to me, actually. I think it's lovely, and it was it was an old institute in kind of, it's been around probably for centuries, to be perfectly honest with you, and it was their annual dinner. And I thought, God, that's so lovely. And it was a black tie dinner. So, I got myself all, got my fancy frock dusted off and stuck it on. And I said to them beforehand, who's the audience? This is a key thing for me, because I can go very technical or I don't go very technical. I just, it depends. As always, you should understand who you're talking to, because you need to bring everybody with you. And so, yeah, they said it's quite a broad audience, but there's a lot of professional people, but covering different professions. And I said, wonderful. And I said, so what I would like to do is put a few slides up just to shape the context, just to shape the story, because it's sometimes nice when you're in a kind of scientific company to share something that you can point to and explain and such like. And they said, no problem, Caroline. No problem. We've got state-of-the-art AV. Okay. And I thought, okay, no problem. So went, lovely, was welcomed warmly and all the rest of it. And before I was going to be talking after the dinner, so I brought my talk on a stick, a USB stick, and I'd also emailed it to them, right? So I always learn to do that, because sometimes your stick doesn't work, or
Yeah.
And so I gave them the stick. And so before we sat down for the dinner, they said, oh, Caroline, but we don't have a computer. Okay, so barrier number one. I said, that's okay. I happen to have my laptop because I've come, I got changed and I just came from work. So I gave them my laptop and opened it up and, stuck the talk on and all the rest of it. And so it was now time to sit down for the dinner. And they said, don't worry, Caroline, we'll get this set up with the projector. We'll be in the next room. We'll get it all sorted. Wonderful. Wonderful dinner, wonderful speeches, lovely, lovely people. Oh my God, it was just super. And then I'm hearing all this noise from the room next door. So I kind of went out, and they were trying to set it up with the projector. And of course, my computer wouldn't speak to their projector. So they'd got rid of the projector, and then they got this big TV screen. So they pulled out this TV screen. So they'd now pulled it into the room because the dinner had finished, and it was my time to talk. And so they pulled this big TV screen out, and they're trying to connect it up. And they'd even taken all the cables out and they taped them down so nobody would step over them. But nothing was working, nothing was communicating, nothing was set up. And I just said, look, it's fine. I will just talk. And so they just kind of went, they just kind of stepped back, and I just gave the presentation. And the reason that I could give the presentation, I think, is that I'm accustomed and I'm familiar with talking about the technology to all different types of audiences. And so you can pull, like, you were brilliant because you pulled Lego bricks into the conversation at the start of this conversation when I was explaining what the technology was. You just have to make things, illustrate things verbally, so people can see what you're seeing. And I do that all the time. I see things. I sound like something out of the Sixth Sense now, actually, but I see things when I'm talking about them. So to me, it makes sense. But you just have to connect them to something that's familiar to everybody, right? So day-to-day things. So anything that's technical, I maintain you can distill it down into simple terms, and you can relate it to something that people will go, oh, yeah, I get what you mean now, Caroline, So, and that's what I did. So I knew what I was wanting to share with the audience. I knew I wanted to touch on a little bit of the history of the type of technology that we worked on. And I knew that I wanted to share how interesting the technology was, and what it does, and what we're aiming, and what our ambitions are. And so all of those are easily translated. It's just the technical side that you need to be able to convert into something that's familiar to people. And that, that's not necessarily, that's something you can just learn. I mean, you just look around you and associate the technology and make it accessible. I think it's really important. It has to be accessible.
Knowing your audience and helping them to relate to what you talk about. And I think that also comes back to not relying too much on having the tech, isn't it? I always start with the audience and the narrative you want to say. And if you can start with that and get that really clearly worked out in your mind, then if you want to use any slides or whatever the visuals, demo videos, etc., great, but never, ever, ever be reliant on them, because that's what ups the stress. But it does also mean that then in that situation that you're in, you can cope without them. So long as you've started with that narrative piece, anything else is a bonus, isn't it?
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, in this situation that I was just describing, which I absolutely adored, it was one of these wonderful interactions where you're there on the floor with everybody. So I tend to walk into the audience, which sounds a bit frightening, but you can actually, not having the slides was probably better for that format, actually, at the end of the day, because you were into the audience, you were talking to them individually and almost and bringing them into the conversation, and it was great fun. This is the whole thing and this is probably my biggest thing that I can share with your audience, is that it's the enjoyment of doing that. It's the enjoyment of, sharing what you want to say with individuals, and the fact that they're there because they want to listen to what's going on, and I'm, like I say, I'm very fortunate that I get the opportunity to talk and to share whatever it is that, if it's science, whether it's my career, whether it's, whatever, me, I can talk about anything.
But just what you said there as well, it goes back to something we talked about earlier, that actually the slides or whatever the tech is a constraint, which is what we were talking about earlier, isn't it? It becomes a constraint that might slightly hold back. If that's the thing where if your slides had worked, you'd have just stood at the top of the room and not moved around, and you would have just been standing there and clicking through your slides. But if anything, you probably connected far more deeply with everyone in that room because you didn't have the slides, and because you would have completely engaged in just listening to you.
That you're absolutely spot on. And I think the other side of the way that I communicated was there was a lot of hand waving and miming, and so it became a whole entertainment center, myself without the without the slides. So true.
And that's all about who you are and your personality shining through. And I think that that's a really great thing for people to think about. Is I think if someone had said to me 20 years ago, where are we going with slides, with PowerPoint? I remember back then thinking, trying to change the world and the behavior of using PowerPoint for everything, and thinking, surely, 20 years time? No, surely we'll be past this. And yet we're still all so heavily reliant on it. And I think people are getting better and understanding more about how to use it better. But actually, yeah, I would just love for everybody I work with to be able to just walk out onto stage or go into a room and not have to rely on anything except for
Yeah.
themselves and their thoughts and connecting with the people they're speaking to. Because I think something that's coming to my mind about everything we've talked about this morning is connecting with people, isn't it?
Huge, absolutely massive. I mean, that's and to be honest, the biggest part of my job and the best part. That's what I love. I love people, and I love sharing, and I love connecting, and I love listening, and networking. So just absolutely, your point there is spot on. So being able to say and on the spot exactly what you're working on, exactly what you're interested on, is integral in particularly into what I do, and I'm sure into what many of your listeners do as well. So networking at any opportunity, if you're in an evening event and you're mixing with individuals. I mean, I have actually done an elevator pitch. I actually got into it. Well, it was in America, so I'm going to say elevator, but obviously I got into the lift.
If you were in the UK, you call it a lift pitch.
Yeah, but a lift pitch doesn't sound so good.
Doesn't have the same ring.
It's not the same kudos, is it? Yeah. So I got into the elevator, and there was an investor got in alongside me, and I was thinking, you've got like how long to get, so it was, of course it was in America, so the elevator was really quick. If it had been in an old building in London or something, I may have had longer. But you just have to be ready to share that with somebody. You have to be able to distill it down and be able to communicate it very simply, very quickly. And it's not about all the detail. This is the key thing about pitching. About pitching is that first pitch is just to get them excited, to get them engaged, to get them on board. You have time to do all the detail, all the follow-up. But if you miss that initial piece where they just kind of, you only tell them half a story because you're getting a bit kind of detailed about one particular aspect, that doesn't work. It's top level headlines, biff, baff, boff.
And what happened?
Oh, yeah, no, it was good, actually. So they did leave, but then we managed to connect afterwards, which was great. Yeah.
Amazing.
So
that's brilliant. I'm delighted that we've got a story about an actual real live elevator pitch.
Elevator pitch.
Okay, so final question for you then. If you've got 3 tips or tactics or tricks of the trade that you would go to, or that you'd recommend to the listeners to the podcast, that you feel have made a big impact on how you either prepare for or when you're delivering any kind of meeting or presentation, what would they be?
Yeah, I think so. The first one is really understanding who the audience is going to be. I mean, this is kind of, it sounds obvious, but it's so critical because that absolutely defines what you're going to present and what you're going to say. And, I've presented in front of, as I've said, very scientific, heavy technical audiences who I found intimidating because they know a lot more than I do, right? I've done talks to school children, primary school children, and I've done talks to a mixed audience at an aquarium randomly. There was 5-year-olds up to 95-year-olds, and God, they give the best questions, honestly. So, but understand your audience, and then you'll be able to pitch it at the right level. Okay, so that's an absolute critical one. Even understanding, coming into that, would also be the setup as well. As you very correctly said, need to understand exactly what the expectation is of how that presentation will be done. So that all kind of wraps around into all of that. I think that the other one to me is really, it's about, again, I come back to this point where, those people are there to enjoy what is going to be said. So it's difficult not to feel frightened. It's difficult to fight the physiology. It's difficult not to be nervous. That's normal. That's your flight and fight. So don't worry about feeling like that. I was told once by one of my PIs to just take a deep breath, if you need to take a moment to yourself before you go and present, take a moment to yourself. Just excuse yourself. Go away into a lobby or whatever, the toilets. Go wherever you need to go, and just take a moment, just to breathe, just to calm, and just to say, these people are here because they want to be here. I've got something really interesting to say, and I really want to share it. They are on your side. right? They are on your side. So just always remember that you're not being judged, okay? You are there to impart something that they don't know and they want to know. So try your best to just take that moment to yourself if you need to. And in that comment as well, do what you need to do. So some people like to take cards up, some people like to take prompts up. You do what you need to do, right? Okay, there is no judgment. Just try and enjoy it. And then the last one is be yourself. So this is, again, it's the most difficult thing is to try and not be yourself, quite frankly. I mean, I remember going up and I had a member of I can't remember, a management team or a new member of the management team came up or was at a conference with me. And I gave I think it was a pitch. I can't remember if it was a science talk. It's probably a combination of the two. And they were really good because they gave me feedback, and I respect feedback. I think that's really important. And they said, crikey, Caroline, you move around a lot and you move your arms around a lot and you do all of these kind of things. Maybe pare it back a little bit. And I kind of listened to them and I thought, you know what? No, because that's me.
Yeah.
That's the way I communicate. That's the way I feel comfortable. I don't even know I'm doing it because I'm lost in it. I'm passionate about what I'm saying. I'm wanting to say it. And this is just the way it comes across. This is the way that I do things. And so I've never, ever changed that.
Yeah.
And I don't intend to.
No, don't. Don't ever change. Don't ever change. Yeah, feedback is really important, but it's also really important where it comes from.
Yes.
And that kind of feedback is something that I often hear, clients say, I've been told that I do that, that I move around or whatever it is. And I will have been sitting with them over a period of a session or, an hour or a day or whatever, and thinking, it's not something I've noticed, or I'm not noticing anything out of the ordinary with what this person's doing. And unless it's something really distracting or quirky, or that someone's doing something that they're not aware they're doing it, jangling their keys in their pockets, clicking a pen. If it's more of a fidgety thing that will be noticeable to people, then maybe you say, put the pen down, take the keys out of your pocket, and so on. But if I'm a mover and a shaker as well, I can't help myself. And so, for me, actually, one of the worst things anyone could do is give me a microphone to hold in my hand, because, I'll be all over the place. I have to I have to rehearse for something like that, because you've got to hold it right under your chin and not move your hands around. But but it's part of your personality. So if you suddenly change and keep your arms down by your sides or sit still, you shave off a whole part of your personality. And that's part of what makes you memorable as well.
Yes, such an important point. That's
what helps, again, connect people to you. And so, it's part of the engagement. So yeah, I'm glad that you decided not to change.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. It's storytelling. It's I think storytelling throughout an engagement. You want people to enjoy what you're saying, and you want to enjoy it. And when you get that, when both of those aspects work, it's great. It's great. So just keep on talking, just keep on sharing, keep on communicating in whichever form. Talking is one form of communication. But it's great. As I said at the start, I'm privileged to be able to do what I do, and to be able to share it, actually. Sharing. Yeah.
Awesome. Caroline, I cannot thank you enough for our conversation this morning. You have just wonderfully wrapped up this season of the podcast by, everything we've talked about, and the takeaways that you've just landed are absolutely perfect for what I've been talking about throughout the whole podcast, not just this season. So thank you so, so much.
My pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. And something, again, this has just been a beautiful conversation. And like we said at the start, I've known you for a long time and you are exceptional. You've been part of my journey right the way through this. And I loved what we learned back in the day and stuff. So yes, thank you so much for the kind invitation. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Pleasure. So If anyone who's listening would like to hear more about Elasmogen, find out more about the company, go to www.elasmogen, elasmogen.com, or look up Caroline Barelle on LinkedIn. And finally, if you want to learn how to be a presenter and be agile across all of your critical communications, please come along to our website at www.mariannejohnston.co.uk for information or to get in touch. If you've enjoyed listening to season 4 of The Agile Speaker, please rate and review the podcast. We love hearing your feedback and it bumps our story up the feed for more people to find out all about it. Many thanks.